Hey guys, tonight we're traveling far from the glow of city lights and screens to a place where the night hums with drums and cicadas, the old kingdom of Benin. Imagine warm air carrying the scent of burning palm oil and wet earth after rain. Out there beneath the vast West African sky, a palace once shimmered in red light, not from torches, not from blood, but from thousands of coral beads gleaming against bronze and skin. You're stepping into that glow tonight, and honestly, if you had to wear what the kings wore under that tropical sun, you'd probably melt before the coronation even began. Those coral robes weighed a ton. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me in the comments, where and when are you listening from? I love knowing which corner of the world you're falling asleep in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on the ochre soil of Benin City, somewhere in the late 15th century. The night is thick, but the palace shines with a strange reddish glow. The walls are coated with earth polished smooth like leather, and the roofs glint faintly under the moon. The hum of distant drums ripples through the air like slow breathing. Somewhere behind you, a storyteller's voice begins to rise and fall. It's the sound of memory, heavy and patient, the kind that doesn't fade even when centuries pass. The kingdom of Benin is alive tonight. The courtyards pulse with life, dancers moving in circles, priests carrying carved ivory staffs, and guards draped in coral beads so dense they clink like glass bottles when they shift. You can almost feel the heat of the oil lamps, the sweat trickling down your neck, the faint scent of smoked pepper drifting from the kitchens. In the center of it all stands the Oba, the king, wrapped from neck to knee in coral red. It's not the glitter of gold that catches your eye, but something more alive, almost pulsing. The coral glows as if lit from within, as though the ocean itself is breathing through those tiny, polished bones. You can't help but stare. Gold might blind you. Coral seems to look back. The courtiers move like shadows around the Oba, careful not to turn their backs. His crown of coral beads presses down over his forehead, hiding his eyebrows, almost hiding his humanity. The weight of the regalia is immense, hundreds of beads, amulets, and carved pendants forming an armor of red. You can hear the faint creak of the fibers beneath them, like wood under strain. And yet the king doesn't move as if burdened. He moves as though the coral itself holds him upright. Gold, you might whisper to yourself, would have been lighter. But here, gold is not the measure of a man. In Benin, gold belongs to merchants. Coral belongs to kings. They say the red glow of the kingdom is the breath of the ancestors. Each bead once touched the sea, the same sea that connects life and death. The Oba standing there is not just a ruler, he is the bridge between worlds. The coral is his proof of connection, his telephone line to the spirits, if you will. And if you've ever tried to call customer service, you know that connection's priceless. Somewhere a conch shell blows, the court freezes. A dancer collapses to the ground in perfect stillness. The Oba raises his coral-covered hand. For a moment, it's as though time holds its breath. The moonlight flickers against the coral, and the red seems to ripple like a slow wave. You think you see it, the faint shimmer of water, the reflection of something vast and old moving beneath the surface of reality. But blink, and it's gone. The drums start again, slow and deep. If you listen closely, you might hear the past rearranging itself around you. The streets of Benin City, wide, straight, more organized than most European cities of the same era, hum with the sound of trade and ritual. Traders from the north arrive with salt and brass. From the south comes palm oil and slaves. From the west, Portuguese ships bring cloth, guns, and those strange red beads that will soon redefine the kingdom's image. You walk past rows of mud houses with pointed roofs, past markets lit by torches. The sellers call out softly, their wares laid out on woven mats. Ivory bracelets, carved masks, little bowls of ochre dust used to polish coral until it shines. There's laughter, bargaining, gossip, and through it all that faint, omnipresent red glimmer. You could almost believe the air itself is tinted with it. The people here whisper that the sea and the king share one soul. The coral comes from the ocean depths, from the realm of Olokun, god of wealth and water. Wearing it means wearing the sea's blessing, or its warning. To take coral lightly is to tempt the tide. And let's be honest, in an era without life jackets, that's a serious gamble. You pause at a shrine. There beneath a carved wooden figure, Someone has placed a single string of coral beads. The firelight makes them look almost wet, as though freshly pulled from the sea. A priest murmurs something under his breath, words you don't know but feel in your bones. The translation roughly would be, "May the coral protect the heart of the kingdom." Historians still debate whether the coral's power was purely spiritual or also political. Some argue it symbolized control over trade routes, a visible reminder that the Oba ruled not just land, but the flow of wealth itself. Others say it was about purity, about binding the ruler to divine law. Whatever the truth, you can tell one thing: no one here doubts the coral's authority. As the night deepens, the palace gates close. The torches burn lower, and the sound of drumming fades into a slow, steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of the earth. Somewhere in the darkness, a storyteller begins to speak again, voice soft as a lullaby. Once before the coral came, gold ruled men, but gold brought envy, and envy brought ruin. So the sea gave us red, to remind us of blood and balance. You look up. The sky is huge, velvet black, scattered with stars that seem to shimmer red in reflection. Maybe it's imagination, or maybe the coral glow is bright enough to reach the heavens. Either way, the world feels warm, enclosed, like you're inside a living lung of time, breathing with a kingdom that refuses to fade. A guard passes by, his necklace rattling gently, and nods at you without breaking stride. You realize how surreal this moment is. You, an outsider from another century, standing in a city where coral is worth more than gold, where kings speak to oceans and beads are prayers. And yet it feels strangely natural, as though some ancient rhythm is rocking you, coaxing you to stay just a little longer, to listen a little deeper. The night smells of salt now, though the sea is far away. Maybe it's the coral, maybe it's memory. You can almost taste the tang of it on your lips. The Oba's laughter echoes faintly from the courtyard, a deep resonant sound that seems to belong to the earth itself. You take one last look at the glowing palace. The red has softened now, turning into a warm amber haze. Somewhere far off, the waves crash against the coast as if answering the heartbeat of the kingdom. You close your eyes and let the sound merge with your breathing. The glow doesn't fade when you blink. It lingers, pulsing behind your eyelids. The same rhythm that's echoed here for centuries, the same rhythm that will carry you forward, deeper into the story of how coral came to define an empire. And as the drums slow to silence, you drift into that rhythm too, and not asleep yet, but hovering right between dreams and memory, right where history hums its softest note. The night doesn't end when the drums fade. It only changes rhythm, softer now, slower, like a tide receding into a dream. You can still see the red glow of the palace walls behind you, but your steps begin to follow the distant sound of water. There's a river somewhere ahead, breathing mist into the warm air. The scent of damp earth and wood smoke clings to your clothes as you walk, and every now and then, a frog croaks as if calling your name. You've left the heart of Benin City and are tracing the veins of the kingdom, the rivers that run like arteries, feeding life, trade, and stories. These rivers are the reason the coral ever found its way here. Long before ships with white sails appeared, the people of Benin had mastered their waterways. Canoes glided silently through mangrove tunnels, carrying ivory, pepper, and cloth. You can almost hear the paddles slicing through black water, steady as breath. Then one day, those rivers carried strangers. It's the late 1400s. The first Portuguese caravels appear on the horizon. Long, lean and restless, their sails glowing orange at sunset. They anchor near the Niger Delta, their decks buzzing with the noise of men shouting in languages the Benin traders can't yet understand. The sea has delivered something new, and the rivers, curious as always, invite them inland. You follow the path of those first Portuguese traders as they move upriver, their boats heavy with copper bracelets, brass ingots, mirrors, and those peculiar red beads from the Mediterranean. In return, they take ivory tusks so pale they gleam in the sun, pepper so sharp it makes your eyes water, and sometimes tragically, people. The river becomes both a road and a mirror, reflecting beauty and greed in equal measure. You kneel by the water. It's warm, smooth as silk against your fingers. The current whispers secrets about the sea beyond, about the lands where coral grows in bright branching gardens beneath the waves. You realize that every drop of this river might have once touched a reef off Italy or Tunisia, carrying the salt of other worlds. The people of Benin watch the newcomers carefully. They are not naive. They understand trade. They've been doing it for centuries across Africa's inland routes. But this is different. These strangers bring metal shaped like jewelry, but meant as currency. They bring stories of lands where the earth freezes, and fish are stored in salt. They bring coral glowing red as sunset. There's a saying whispered among the elders, when the river meets the sea, both must learn a new song. In the palace, the Oba sends his envoys to meet the Portuguese. Gifts are exchanged. Leopard skins for copper, carved masks for coral. You stand at the edge of the court and watch, as interpreters try to weave words between worlds. It's awkward at first, but laughter soon fills the gaps. Trade, after all, is its own kind of language. The Portuguese are stunned by what they see in Benin City. Wide roads, clean streets, guards in coral and bronze. Art so refined it feels like it's watching you back. One merchant writes that the city is as large as Lisbon, though you suspect he's exaggerating for bragging rights. Still, you can tell he's dazzled. To him, this is no savage land but a mirror world, different yet eerily advanced. The Benin traders, meanwhile, eye the coral with quiet fascination. It's not just pretty. It feels alive. Each bead holds the shimmer of the sea, the promise of something divine. The Oba himself orders the first strands to be brought to the palace. He touches one and smiles, not greedily, but knowingly. As though he's recognized a long-lost relative, you can almost hear him think, the sea has sent its messenger. At first, coral is just another trade good, a curiosity among others. But slowly it begins to take root in ritual and meaning. Priests claim it carries the breath of Olokun, god of the deep waters. Fishermen say it hums when the tide turns. Mothers believe that wearing coral near the heart protects a child from fever. And of course the Oba, ever the symbol of balance, sees its power as something meant only for kings. There's humor in this exchange too. The Portuguese, sweating under the sun, marvel at how Benin nobles dress in layers of coral despite the heat. One captain supposedly joked, "These people wear the sea upon their backs." You can almost imagine him fanning himself, wishing for the modern miracle of air conditioning. If only he knew how much history he was witnessing, or how poorly his descendants would handle museum etiquette. Night falls again as you follow the river's bend. Fireflies blink like drifting embers. Somewhere upriver, a drummer starts a slow rhythm that sounds suspiciously like the pulse of an engine. You wonder if the river still remembers those first ships, their wooden hulls cutting through water that had never seen such shapes before. Historians still debate exactly when the Portuguese arrived in Benin, some say around 1485, others a few years earlier. What they agree on is that this meeting forever changed both sides. The Portuguese found a new source of ivory and slaves. Benin found a new palette of materials, from brass for casting to coral for crowns. It was not friendship, not conquest, something in between, a dance of convenience wrapped in mutual awe. You sit on a fallen log near the water, listening to the croak of frogs and the rustle of palms. In the moonlight, the river looks like liquid bronze, the same color that would later define Benin's art. It's almost poetic. The river that brought coral also brought copper, both glowing in their own ways, both destined to merge into the soul of a kingdom. Sometimes you wonder how it must have felt to be a young Benin craftsman back then, seeing coral for the first time, touching it, realizing it wasn't stone but something softer, organic, born of living creatures under foreign waves. Maybe it felt a little like magic, or like touching the skin of a god. You might have thought, if the sea can grow jewels, what else might it hide? The river's current picks up speed, glinting with starlight. You lean closer, hearing whispers beneath the flow. The Portuguese are long gone, but their words seem to linger, promises of trade, of wealth, of friendship that won't last. The water carries echoes of deals made and broken, of languages half learned, of coral beads rolling across wooden decks on their way to a new destiny. As dawn begins to lighten the eastern sky, you see the Oba's couriers arriving at the riverbank. They bring ivory, bronze bracelets, and woven cloth to trade for more coral. The kingdom's heartbeat is changing, sinking to a new rhythm, the rhythm of the tide. The red glow of the palace, you realize, is not fading. It's spreading, carried by every bead, every story, every ripple of this river. You dip your hand once more into the water. It's cool now, soothing. You can almost feel the faint vibration of centuries moving beneath your palm. The river doesn't care who sails it, It only remembers. And as it winds toward the sea, toward the coral's birthplace, it hums that same lullaby it's always sung. A tune of trade and transformation, of loss and connection. You close your eyes and let that sound fill you. The river has done its work. It has brought the treasures, the strangers, the questions that will change everything. And soon, beyond the horizon, the story will dive deeper into the coral's own journey, far from these shores. The red tide is only beginning to rise. The night air feels heavier now, thick with salt and the faint metallic scent of rain that hasn't yet fallen. You follow the sound of waves brushing against wooden hulls, and you realize you're standing on a dock. Only it isn't Benin anymore. The ocean in front of you stretches far beyond the horizon, and the air carries the whisper of languages you don't understand. Italian, Arabic, Portuguese. Someone shouts, a bell rings, and nets filled with something red and glistening rise from the water like bleeding sunlight. That is where the coral begins its long journey toward the kingdom of Benin, born in the Mediterranean, raised by the sea, traded by men who never imagined that, somewhere far away, a king would one day wear their catch as a crown. You step closer and the dock creaks beneath your weight. The fishermen are tanned, their hands rough as sandpaper, their laughter short and tired. In the nets you see branches of red coral, so alive they almost look like they're still breathing. The fishermen call it corallium rubrum, and they treat it with a kind of reverence, though not the same kind the Oba's priests would later give it. Here it's simply valuable. A merchant holds a branch to the light, squinting as if trying to decide whether it's the color of fire or blood. You think it's both. You follow him as he takes the coral through narrow streets paved with limestone, through markets where Venetian glass glitters beside North African ivory. The scent of salt fades into that of warm bread, fish, and hot metal. In the distance you hear church bells. You're in Italy now, maybe Genoa, maybe Naples. It doesn't matter. What matters is the coral's story continues here, far from the shores where it will one day rest around a king's neck. Inside a workshop, dimly lit by oil lamps, artisans polish the coral with linen and ash. They file away rough edges, carve beads, and string them onto thin threads of silver. Their tools sing in small metallic chimes, echoing faintly against the stone walls. You notice how the coral darkens when touched, like it drinks in warmth from the human hand. There's an old superstition whispered between the workers. Coral dies when separated from the sea, but if worn by someone powerful enough, it lives again. You can almost hear the Oba laughing softly across time. Yes, it lives again on me. The merchants here don't know that. They trade it by weight, by color, by rumor. They believe coral protects sailors from storms and women from infertility. Some wear small fragments as amulets against the evil eye. You watch a woman fasten a coral pendant around her child's neck, kissing it for luck. The same red, the same shape, yet a completely different meaning. History often does that. Takes one thing, splits it into 1,000 lives. As days pass, the coral travels further south, across the sea to North Africa, where Berber traders exchange it for salt, cloth, and gold dust. From there, caravans carry it through desert routes under skies that shimmer with heat. The beads move from hand to hand, each trader adding a story, each market adding value. By the time the coral reaches the coast again, near the Gulf of Guinea, it's no longer just coral. It's an object of mystery, touched by the Mediterranean, the Sahara, and countless unknown prayers. One evening, you stand beside a Portuguese ship, anchored off the coast of Lagos. The deck smells of tar and citrus peels. Sailors hum low songs about home and lost loves. Crates filled with coral sit beside barrels of wine and copper manillas, bracelets used as currency. A young sailor dips his hand into one crate, letting the red beads slip through his fingers like drops of sunset. He doesn't know that these small, beautiful things will soon decorate a palace wall thousands of miles away. In a city called Edo, you can almost see the map stretching beneath your feet, from the Italian coasts to African sands, across the Gulf of Guinea into the forests of Benin. The coral's route glows faintly in your mind, like veins carrying lifeblood between worlds. The trade winds shift, and with them, destinies do too. Some historians still argue whether coral first arrived through Portuguese trade or earlier through trans-Saharan routes. The records are vague, fragmentary, like coral fragments scattered on a beach. But one thing is certain: when it reached Benin, it found a people who understood its spirit better than anyone before them. You imagine the first exchange. A Portuguese trader steps onto Benin's red earth, his boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. The sun is cruel that day, bright enough to make even gold seem dull. He opens a wooden chest and inside the coral gleams, red as fresh embers. The Oba's emissaries lean closer, silent. The trader expects excitement for his brass and silver, but it's the coral that catches every eye. Perhaps one elder murmurs a word in Edo tongue, something that means the blood of the sea. In that moment, the coral's long pilgrimage ends and begins again. It leaves the hands of men who mind it for profit and enters a kingdom that will turn it into meaning. You see artisans of Benin tracing the shapes of each bead, whispering prayers as they work. For them, coral is not decoration. It's a bridge between the living and the dead, between ocean and land. The wind picks up. Somewhere behind you, waves crash against the rocks, scattering droplets that sting your skin like memory. You feel as though the coral's journey has stitched itself into you too, a red thread running from distant waters to your own pulse. You look down at your hands. For a second, they glow faintly, as if the sea has claimed you. You think of all the people who touch these same coral beads, fishermen who risked their lives diving deep into the cold Mediterranean, traders who crossed deserts with them, hidden under their robes, sailors who prayed to them in storms, kings who wore them as the mark of divine right. It's strange, isn't it? How something once alive under the sea can become the heartbeat of a kingdom. Some say the coral carries whispers, that if you press it to your ear, you can hear not the ocean, but the murmurs of every hand that ever held it. You try it. The sound is faint, almost lost beneath the waves, but it's there. A rhythm like breathing, like history itself refusing to die. You let the sound fade. The wind grows warmer now, carrying scents of wood smoke and rain. The coral has reached its new home. It will rest in royal chambers, circle the Oba's neck, and catch the flicker of firelight like drops of living blood. Soon, songs will be sung about it. Myths will form. And yet, none of those singers will know about the fishermen of Italy, the caravans of sand, the Portuguese deckhands counting crates under the moon. But you do. You've followed every step. You've seen how the sea's red breath became a crown. And somewhere deep in your chest, maybe you feel a little of that coral glow too, warm, strange, and softly alive. The air in Benin grows thick and golden as the sun climbs higher, heavy enough that even the shadows seem to sweat. You walk through the palace courtyard, where coral beads shimmer like drops of blood under the light, and you notice something missing. There's no gold here, no glinting crowns, no sunburst bracelets, no coins flashing in the dust. In most kingdoms, gold would be the heartbeat of glory. But here in this city of red and bronze, gold has somehow lost its shine. You run your fingers along a carved pillar, its surface smooth and cool. Somewhere, a court musician plucks a note on a stringed instrument, low and soft. It feels like the kingdom itself is humming. A servant passes by, carrying a heavy coral necklace on a velvet cloth. And you can't help but ask yourself, why coral? Why not gold, that universal symbol of wealth and divinity? You think of European thrones gleaming like sunrise, of Egyptian tombs filled with golden masks, of kings who drowned in their own treasure. And yet here gold sits quietly in storage rooms, forgotten like an unwanted gift. They say the air itself rejects gold. In the sweltering humidity of Benin, gold turns sticky against the skin, its glow dulled by sweat and time. Coral, on the other hand, stays cool, smooth, almost alive. When you press it to your palm, it feels as if it's breathing. The Oba's priests whisper that coral holds the essence of water, and water in Benin means life. Gold might glitter like the sun, but the sun burns, coral soothes. You walk further into the palace, past murals of old kings, each adorned not with gold crowns, but with layered collars of coral beads. Their eyes, carved from bronze, follow you. A local historian once said that the body of the Oba is sacred, that it must never be touched by metal meant for ordinary men. Gold, mined from the earth, belongs to the realm of mortality. Coral born from the sea connects heaven and the ancestors. And in Benin's world, the sea is not just a place. It's a spirit, an infinite body of souls. The Oba once told his court, "Gold belongs to those who dig. Coral belongs to those who dream." You can almost hear his voice echoing in the chambers. It's the kind of poetic confidence only a ruler who has seen empires bow could have. You imagine him laughing when the first European traders offered gold bars as gifts, politely declining, perhaps saying something like, "Keep your son." We already have the sea, and yet the story runs deeper. The people of Benin believe that every material carries a spirit. Gold's spirit, radiant and consuming, was thought to attract envy and misfortune. Coral's spirit was balanced, strong but gentle, fierce but protective. Even the priests said that wearing too much gold could anger the ancestors, as though you were dressing yourself in the pride of the earth rather than the humility of the ocean. Coral, meanwhile, was seen as a blessing from Olokun, the god of the deep waters, the keeper of dreams and wealth. You step into a smaller room where artisans shape coral into new forms. Their tools click and scrape in steady rhythm. One of them looks up and smiles, his face shining with sweat and pride. He tells you that when coral touches the oba's skin, it completes a sacred circle. Sea meets land, life meets spirit. Gold, he says softly, is too proud to listen. You chuckle at that because even metal apparently has manners here. Some historians still argue over the real reason Benin chose coral over gold. Some say it was political, a way to distinguish the kingdom from its neighbors. Others claim it was practical. Coral simply lasted longer in the heat. But the truth, you feel, is somewhere in between. Like all things in Benin, the answer is layered. Part science, part spirit, part story. At night, the city glows differently. The palace doesn't shine like gold. It pulses like a living heart. Lanterns swing gently in the breeze, casting red reflections across walls and courtyards. You realize that gold could never do this. It reflects light, yes, but coral seems to hold it. It doesn't just sparkle. It glows from within. There's something almost human about that. You remember hearing that coral changes color with time, deepening as it absorbs oils from the skin, growing warmer, richer. It's as though every person who wears it leaves a trace of themselves behind. Imagine that. The oba's necklaces passed from one generation to another, each bead carrying whispers of countless kings. No gold bar could ever do that. Gold remains gold, perfect, untouchable, unchanged. Coral, though, evolves. It remembers. As you move through the hall, you catch sight of a small shrine dedicated to Olokun. The statue is surrounded by shells and coral fragments, glistening in the candlelight. A priest hums softly, his voice low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. He sprinkles water on the coral and murmurs a blessing. You kneel beside him, feeling the cool mist on your face. He says something you can barely hear. Gold blinds. Coral opens the eyes. Outside, thunder rolls in the distance. Rain begins to fall, first in hesitant drops, then in heavy sheets. You rush under a canopy, but the palace guards don't move. They lift their faces to the sky, letting the rain soak them. The coral around their necks darkens, each bead now the color of ripe pomegranate. You notice how beautiful it looks, alive, renewed. Maybe that's the secret. Coral thrives in the water, just as Benin thrived beside its rivers. Gold would have melted in that storm, at least symbolically. Coral, it dances. You laugh quietly to yourself. If you wore coral jewelry today, you'd probably just call it sustainable fashion. But to them, it was a bridge between worlds. Even the simplest bracelet was an anchor to ancestry, to divinity. You think about how odd it is that modern people wear gold to impress strangers, while the kings of Benin wore coral to speak with gods. When the rain ends, the air feels lighter. You walk past a reflecting pool, and in its surface, the palace seems to float on red ripples. You can almost believe the city is breathing. The oba steps out onto a terrace, the coral crown glistening on his head. He looks out across the soaked courtyards, his reflection glowing faintly in the water. Gold would have turned his face into a mirror. Coral lets his humanity show through. For a long moment, you just stand there, watching the red light fade into dusk. Somewhere a drum begins to beat, a low, steady rhythm like a heartbeat. You realize it's the same rhythm the coral beads seem to hum back in the workshop, the same one you felt on that ship from the Mediterranean. It's the pulse of continuity, of something alive and unbroken. And as night finally settles over Benin, you think about how strange it is that the world once worshipped gold, but forgot how to listen to the color red, the color of life, of sea, of memory. In Benin, they never forgot. To them, the glow of coral wasn't just beautiful. It was sacred, practical, and alive all at once. You take a deep breath, tasting rain in the air. The gold may have lost its shine, but here, under the quiet hum of the night, coral burns brighter than ever. The night air over Benin feels different as you drift deeper into the story. There's a quiet hum in the air, a pulse like the steady beat of a drum under your skin. You can almost hear the low murmur of a priest chanting in the royal courtyard, his voice weaving through the darkness, rising and falling like the tide. The smell of palm oil lamps and burning herbs fills your lungs, thick and sacred. You're not just watching anymore. You're standing there, your feet on the earth that once trembled under the steps of the Oba, the divine king of Benin. In this world, the Oba's body isn't merely human flesh. It's a bridge between people and gods, between land and ocean, between the living and the ancestors. The coral he wears isn't decoration. It's armor for the soul. You notice how each strand of beads glows faintly under torchlight, each one carved, blessed and alive. When the Oba moves, the coral shifts like blood flowing over skin, red, luminous, almost breathing. You half expect it to whisper. You might think it's just jewelry, right? But here in the heart of the ancient Benin Kingdom, coral is sacred flesh. The Oba's neck, wrists and ankles are wrapped in coral beads so dense that he moves slowly like a living statue. Some European visitors once wrote that the king appeared weighed down by his ornaments. They missed the point entirely. Those beads weren't ornaments. They were boundaries, the only things that kept divine power from spilling over, from burning the mortal world. The coral's redness wasn't chosen for beauty alone. It was chosen because it mirrored the pulse of life itself: blood, energy, protection. In a land where the sun could scorch gold into uselessness, coral stayed cool, ocean-born, resilient. Some storytellers whispered that the gods themselves sent coral as a gift, a reminder that even a king must depend on something that once lived and breathed beneath waves. You can almost see him now, the Oba, sitting on his carved ivory throne. His skin glows deep bronze, his eyes steady as the river at dusk. Every inch of him tells a story. The coral crown rises from his head like fire, his chest covered in layered necklaces that clink softly when he breathes. Around him attendants kneel, faces lowered. No one dares to touch the coral without ritual cleansing. To do so would be like touching lightning. Historians still debate exactly how the people of Benin understood the Oba's sacred body. Some say he was considered half spirit, half human, a man transformed by coral into something unearthly. Others argue that the coral simply symbolized his divine role, a visible reminder of the oceanic origins of all life. Maybe both are true. In the soft darkness of ritual, boundaries blur anyway. What they do agree on is this: the Oba's body was not his own. It belonged to the kingdom, to the ancestors, to the gods. The coral served as both protection and prison, binding him to a destiny too heavy for most to bear. When he walked among his people, he didn't walk as a man. He moved as a living altar. You imagine the heat of all those layers pressing against your skin, the steady weight at your throat. No wonder he carried himself with such stillness. It wasn't pride, it was gravity, the kind that comes from holding centuries of faith and fear inside one heartbeat. Some chronicles tell of how coral was believed to cool the Oba's divine fire. Without it, his power might consume everything he touched. That's probably not the kind of skincare problem you can fix with a modern moisturizer. You'd need an ocean, and yet there's tenderness in it too. When the Oba performed rituals for rain or peace, his coral gleamed brightest under sunlight, as if remembering its home beneath the sea. The priests would sprinkle water over him, and the coral would shimmer, releasing tiny drops like sweat or tears. People said that meant the ancestors were listening. You catch yourself wondering, did he ever feel lonely beneath all that sanctity, trapped behind layers of sacred red? Some travelers wrote that the Oba rarely spoke directly to anyone but priests. He ate alone, slept surrounded by silence. Perhaps coral not only protected him from spirits, but also from other humans. There's a strange kind of comfort in that idea, the thought that even kings, even divine ones, longed for touch, for warmth unfiltered by ritual. But in Benin, such longing was dangerous. Every act of the Oba was cosmic. His smallest gesture could tilt the balance between worlds. One evening, as legend tells it, a young servant accidentally brushed against the king's coral sleeve. The boy froze in terror, realizing what he'd done. But the Oba only looked at him and smiled. "Do not fear," he said softly. "The sea forgives." It's one of the few stories that show the Oba as human, or maybe that was the coral speaking through him. Each strand of coral had its own origin and blessing. Before being worn, the beads were washed in river water, rubbed with chalk and offered to Olokun, the god of the deep sea, keeper of wealth and mystery. The idea was that the ocean would lend its calm to the king's heart, its endlessness to his rule. That's quite a deal. Imagine if politicians today had to make a pact with the ocean before taking office. Half of them wouldn't survive the first wave. The sound of distant drums rises in your ears. You picture the palace at dusk, the king emerging from the inner chambers, his coral glinting against twilight, the courtiers bowing low. There's something hypnotic about that scene, the fusion of red and gold light, the weight of silence, and beneath it all the steady heartbeat of the city, alive with reverence. But coral wasn't just for ceremony. It was said to heal. In small charms, coral powder was mixed with herbs to treat fevers or ward off bad dreams. Mothers tied coral around their babies' wrists to protect them from evil spirits. And when someone died, a single bead might be buried with them. A ticket home to the ancestors' realm. Even in death, coral marked the path. The connection between the Oba and his coral was so absolute that when a new king ascended the throne, his regalia had to be reconsecrated. The coral couldn't simply be reused. It had to be awakened again, ritually washed, sung to, and invited to breathe. You can almost hear the priests whispering over the water, their voices low and steady, as if coaxing something ancient to open its eyes. The more you think about it, the more you realize coral was never about luxury. It was about balance, between heat and coolness, fire and sea, man and God. Gold glittered, yes, but it didn't breathe. Coral did. And maybe that's what the people of Benin understood better than anyone. That the truest wealth is not what shines, but what lives. The torches flicker lower. The Oba's coral glows one last time before fading into shadow. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the river hums softly, carrying the memory of salt and wave. You can almost taste the air, warm, thick, a little metallic, like the breath before a storm. You let it wash over you, this mingling of body and ocean, of human and divine. And as the night deepens, you begin to sense what the coral always knew, that power is not in gold or even in kings, but in the quiet rhythm that binds everything together, the pulse beneath the skin, the heartbeat of the sea. The courtyard hums with low drums and the quiet shuffle of bare feet over dusted earth. You feel it before you hear it, that steady pulse that seems to rise through the soles of your feet and settle somewhere behind your ribs. It's dusk again, that soft hour when the sun has given up its glare, but the air still trembles with heat. The coral beads you saw earlier are no longer silent ornaments. Now they glow faintly in the fading light, waiting for the ritual to begin. You stand at the edge of the square. The Oba's attendants move like waves, their skin glistening with palm oil, their wrists and necks heavy with strings of red. One of them adjusts a mask carved with impossible precision, smooth cheekbones, sharp eyes, lips that seem to whisper even in stillness. When the first chant starts, it is low, almost conversational, but the rhythm grows, folding into layers of voices until the night feels alive. You catch the scent of burning wood mixed with something sweet and sharp. Maybe the resin they use to bless the beads. Each coral bead, they say, has been touched by water from the ancestral river. Not all coral is equal. Some pieces, dark and mottled, are believed to hold more power, the kind that tames lightning or calms angry spirits. The priests hold these beads in both hands, whispering words you don't understand, then pass them carefully to the attendants. Every gesture is deliberate, slow enough to feel sacred. It's strange, you think, how something so small can carry so much weight. In another world, people wear gold to show they have conquered time. That metal which never rusts, never fades. But here in this kingdom bound by red, permanence is not the goal. Coral, fragile and living, once thrived under the sea before it was pulled into the air. It bleaches, breaks and dies, yet that's exactly why it's powerful. It reminds them and you that life is borrowed, not owned. A boy steps forward carrying a wooden bowl. Inside are hundreds of tiny coral fragments, still wet from the ritual washing. He walks slowly around the circle, and each elder dips their fingers in, rubbing the water behind their ears and over their hearts. You follow their movement with your eyes and catch how the water glows faintly orange against dark skin. For a heartbeat, you imagine the coral pulsing like blood. Someone behind you whispers that this is the moment the new Oba's spirit meets the ocean's memory. When the beads are placed upon him, he is no longer just a man. He becomes the bridge between ancestors and the living. There's a sudden hush, the kind that makes you aware of every breath. The drums stop. Even the insects seem to pause. From the shadow of a doorway, the Oba emerges, his body oiled and bare except for a white cloth at his waist, His chest rises and falls slowly like a tide. The high priest steps forward holding the coral crown. Each bead has been shaped by years of salt and pressure. Each string took months to carve, polish, and bless. You notice how heavy it looks, not in mass but in meaning. When the priest places the crown upon the oba's head, the air seems to shift. The red catches the last trace of sunlight and flares like fire. The crowd exhales together. Somewhere a child laughs softly, and someone else begins to weep. You find yourself doing neither, just standing very still, as if afraid to disturb the balance. You remember something you read, or maybe dreamed, about how coral once grew faster when storms came. The turbulence fed it. Maybe power works like that too. Only those who survive chaos can wear its beauty. Historians still debate whether these rituals began as acts of devotion or control. Some say the coral was meant to remind the king that even he owed life to the sea. Others believe it was a clever way for the court priests to keep him bound to tradition. Either way, as you watch him now, standing still with his eyes closed and red light washing over him, the argument feels irrelevant. The truth is in the silence between drum beats. When the music returns, it is softer. The oba raises one hand, his fingers shimmering with red bracelets. Every movement sends a whisper of light scattering across the crowd. You realize the sound of the beads brushing together is almost like rain. People bow their heads as he begins to walk, slow and deliberate, through the line of attendants. Wherever he passes, they sprinkle crushed coral dust on the ground, a powder that glows faintly pink under torchlight. Someone near you murmurs that the dust keeps evil spirits from following. You think it might also be to remind the people where he's walked, a visible memory that fades with time. Like footsteps in sand, the ceremony shifts into dance. The drums find a faster rhythm. The air thickens and you feel sweat roll down your back. The dancers' beads rattle like dry seeds, their feet kicking up clouds of red powder. It sticks to your ankles. For a moment, it feels like you're standing inside a sunset that refuses to end. A joke flits through your mind, something about how your gym's dance classes never looked this coordinated. And you almost laugh, but the thought melts away as quickly as it comes. The dance isn't just for celebration, it's for remembering. Each movement mirrors an ancient pattern. The sea rising, the wind bending palms, the tide pulling back. Everything circles. Everything returns. When the drums finally slow, the coral crown has turned dark in the nightlight. The oba stands beneath the carved gate, his chest streaked with salt and sweat. The priest hands him a bowl filled with palm wine. He drinks once, twice, then pours the rest onto the ground. You hear the hiss as it hits the dust, and somehow it sounds like gratitude. He turns his gaze toward the horizon, where the stars begin to spark one by one, and you follow it. Somewhere beyond that edge lies the same sea that birthed the coral, that carried it across the world to this very place. You wonder how many times that ocean has been both giver and taker, both calm and storm. The oba begins to speak, his voice deep but measured. You don't understand every word, but you catch fragments: blood, river, home. The people answer softly after each phrase, their tones weaving through his like threads of music. The coral around his neck glows with each response, as if breathing with the crowd. When it ends, the night doesn't feel empty. It feels full, like a drum still echoing long after it's struck. You catch yourself breathing slower, softer. Maybe it's the air, or maybe it's that quiet understanding that some stories don't end. They simply become rituals of their own. You brush a bit of red dust from your wrist and smile faintly. "Guess I'm officially part of the ceremony now," you whisper. Nobody hears it but the night, and that's enough. Above you, the moon climbs higher, silver against the red glow below. The beads gleam faintly, like embers resting on skin. And for a moment, you imagine the kingdom itself breathing, hat and out, in rhythm with the sea. A pulse of coral, of memory, of life. The drums from the coronation still echo in your chest, long after the crowd has scattered. The air smells faintly of smoke, salt, and something metallic, like the earth itself has been stirred awake. You walk through the narrow alleys behind the palace, where the night hums differently. It's quieter here, yet not silent. You can hear the faint tapping of metal against metal, a rhythm that doesn't belong to music but to labor. You follow the sound. It leads you toward a low building with an open roof. the walls darkened by years of fire and soot. Inside, orange light flickers, reflecting off rows of half-finished faces, bronze faces frozen mid-breath, each one wearing coral beads around its neck. The workshop of the royal casters, the Igun street of Benin. Heat rolls toward you in waves. The smell of molten brass is thick, almost sweet, and you can feel the weight of it settle in your lungs. A man lifts a crucible, the liquid metal inside glowing like captured sunlight. He pours it into a mold, and you hear that quiet hiss, a whisper between fire and form. You edge closer. The master caster, his skin slick with sweat, watches the metal cool as if listening for its heartbeat. Around him, apprentices grind beeswax, carve figures, polish finished plaques. You notice how everything here seems alive. Even the molds look like they might exhale at any moment. Don't blink, you think, or one of these statues might blink back. There's a rhythm to their work, pour, wait, polish, repeat, and yet every motion carries reverence. They're not just making art, they're summoning memory. Each cast bronze head represents a king who once ruled, each one crowned with coral to keep his spirit bound to the living. These sculptures are the voices of the ancestors, meant to stand guard in the palace shrines long after the flesh has turned to dust. One apprentice points to a half-finished plaque depicting a procession, the oba at the center, his head crowned in coral, attendants fanning him with carved ivory fans. Around the edge, Portuguese sailors appear, their faces strange and pale beside the dark bronze. "We record everything," he says softly, "even the visitors who think they discovered us." You smile at that. The plaque looks like a page in a metal diary, a history not written but poured. You crouch to watch another caster trace fine details with a thin chisel. The sound is delicate, almost tender. It reminds you of someone sharpening a pencil before a long letter. His hands are steady, his movements slow, and when he leans back, you see the figure take shape. Not a human, but a coral bead, enlarged and glowing in relief. The bead itself seems to breathe. These craftsmen call themselves the Igun Eronwon, the bronze casters of Benin, and they have served the Oba's line for centuries. It's said their skills came from a gift of the gods, fire that obeys, metal that remembers. But others, the skeptics, the historians with their notebooks and magnifying glasses, still debate how they mastered the lost wax technique so early. Some claim the method arrived with European traders. Others argue it was born here, deep in the soil, long before the first ship ever sailed from Lisbon. You think about it as you watch the molten metal cool. Maybe truth isn't so much about who invented what, but about who remembered how to make it beautiful. A small boy runs past, carrying a bucket of water. He stops when he sees you and grins. His teeth flash in the light. He points to the bronze faces drying on the shelf. "They will live forever," he says, "but only if we keep feeding them fire." You're not sure if he means the furnaces or the stories. The master turns toward you then, his eyes glinting behind a veil of heat. "Coral," he says, tapping the side of one statue's neck, "is the blood. Bronze is the bone." His voice is deep, quiet, but firm, the kind of tone that doesn't ask for belief, it assumes it. The Oba cannot be remembered with paint or cloth, only with fire. Fire knows how to hold a king. Behind him, a row of ancestral heads catches the light. The red beads around their necks gleam faintly, even though they're made of bronze, not coral. You wonder if it's a trick of the fire or something else. The room fills again with sound. Hammers tapping, bellows breathing, metal sighing. You lose track of time. Outside, the night thickens. Somewhere a rooster crows too early, confused by the glow spilling from the forge. There's a moment when the molten metal finally cools, and the master breaks open the clay mold. A head appears, serene, symmetrical, and eerily lifelike. The coral crown has been rendered perfectly, each bead rounded and connected by thin ridges of metal. The Oba's eyes, wide and steady, seem to look right through you. You realize this isn't just art, it's communication. A conversation between the living and the dead, carried through metal and memory. Each head tells the next king, "You are not alone. We're watching." The casters work in silence now, as if under spell. You glance at the floor. where countless bronze shavings shimmer like fallen stars. The heat has painted your skin in a thin sheen of sweat. You wipe your brow and think how odd it is that something so heavy as metal can feel so alive. The master wipes his hands on a cloth and steps outside. You follow him into the cooler air. The moon has climbed high, pale and steady above the dark roofs. He gestures toward the city, the palace walls, the drum towers, the sleeping courtyards. Everything you see, he murmurs, has a twin in bronze somewhere. When fire forgets, the kingdom disappears. You ask softly, "Do you ever make something for yourself?" He laughs, a dry, almost musical sound. "For myself? No. My hands belong to memory. My sons will make for me when I am gone." You think about that, about legacy, about how art becomes a vessel when the body cannot stay. Maybe that's why the bronze casters never stop working. They're building eternity one mold at a time. Somewhere behind you, a pot cracks open with a pop. Sparks scatter into the night, tiny orange stars that fade before touching the ground. You can't help but smile. "If this were my kitchen," you whisper, "I'd have burned down the neighborhood by now." The master chuckles. "That's why we say, fire is a servant until it remembers it was born a god." He turns back toward the workshop, his silhouette framed by the glow. The rhythm starts again. Hammer, hiss, breath. You stand there a while longer, watching the fire paint everything in shades of red and gold, the color of coral, the color of life. As you finally step away, you catch one last glimpse of the bronze heads lined up in the shadows, their coral crowns gleaming faintly. They seem to follow you, not with menace, but with quiet recognition, as if to say you've seen the fire now. You know how it remembers, and in that moment, with the night wrapped close around you and the forge still whispering behind, you realize that the Kingdom of Benin didn't just build art. It built memory that refuses to die. The night air still hums softly around you, that same velvet quiet that's been wrapping the story since you first entered Benin's red-lit kingdom. The fires of the bronze casters have dimmed now, replaced by something colder, paler, the shimmer of sails on the horizon. You hear them before you see them, the creak of wood, the slap of waves, the clatter of metal buckles. The Europeans are coming. Not conquerors yet, just traders, explorers, men with maps so wrong they might as well be bedtime doodles. They stand at the edge of the kingdom, blinking under the tropical sun, their pale faces sweating beneath wide-brimmed hats. You can almost smell the mixture of salt and curiosity radiating from them. They've heard rumors, of course, of a city gleaming in red, of a king who commands the forest and the tide. But what they expect is gold. Always gold. That metal sings to them like a siren from their own mythologies. So when they walk through the great gate of Benin, carrying gifts wrapped in linen, they stop. Their mouths open. Their notes tremble. Because everything glows, yes, but not with the yellow light they know. It's red, deep, living ocean red. You walk beside them in spirit, your feet brushing the baked clay road. The palace walls rise like a mirage, carved wood, polished brass, and beads that catch the sun, as if the whole city wears dawn as jewelry. You see the Oba's guards bare-chested and steady, their necks heavy with coral. Even the air feels perfumed with salt and earth. One of the European scribes, clutching a journal already damp with sweat, mutters something about how these Africans confuse wealth with color. You almost laugh. Wealth with color. As if the two were not born together in every sunrise. They write down everything, these men. They describe what they see, but through lenses clouded with their own desires. There is no gold, one complains, as if disappointed the world dared to be different. Only beads of red stone. They say it is from the sea. His hand trembles slightly as he writes, because deep down even he can sense that something here slips beyond his understanding. You notice how they frown at the Oba's calmness. No greed flickers in his gaze. No rush to barter. The gifts they bring, bolts of fabric, mirrors, a few silver trinkets, are accepted with grace but not awe. The Oba's palace already reflects the wealth of centuries. Coral glows at every threshold, like frozen blood of the earth, and the king himself seems clothed in tide and sunlight. At night, the visitors are given quarters within the outer courtyard. They cannot sleep. The drums from the temple beat slowly, not music but memory. You can imagine one merchant lying awake, staring at the roof beams, wondering if he's entered a kingdom ruled by spirits rather than men. Do they worship the ocean? He whispers to his companion. Or the color red itself? The other shrugs. Perhaps both. There's a pause, a flicker of unease, and yet they have order. They have roads, guards, even art finer than what we've seen in Lisbon. His friend sighs. But no gold. You grin quietly in the dark, because sometimes history itself feels like a joke played by time. Europeans crossed the world chasing yellow metal, and here they found red stone pulsing with deeper meaning than they could grasp. As dawn breaks, you wander with them through the market. The stalls glisten with ivory, cloth, carved wood. But everywhere, coral rules. Strings of it hang like rivers of sunrise. Women wear it woven into their hair. Children play with tiny fragments, holding them to their eyes as if seeing the ocean through stone. You pick up a bead yourself. It's cool at first touch, then warms quickly as though remembering your skin. One Portuguese merchant, growing bolder, asks to trade for a necklace. The vendor laughs softly and shakes her head. That is not for you, she says in Edo. You can buy the shells, not the sea. The interpreter stumbles, unsure how to translate such poetry. Eventually, he mutters something about religious value, but you see the confusion linger in the merchant's eyes, the sense that he's brushed against a boundary, invisible but absolute. Later that afternoon, a local guide brings them to watch a festival rehearsal. Dancers spin in white cloth edged with red. Drummers beat out a heartbeat older than any compass line. The oba watches from his veranda, unmoving, serene. The Europeans take notes again, but their words grow restless. They cannot decide if this is theater or faith or something in between. Perhaps, one writes, these people do not separate art from life. You almost whisper back, perhaps you should not either. The sun lowers, gold melting into crimson haze. The Europeans, tired and half-dazed, return to their ships. Some carry coral beads as trade goods. Unaware they hold symbols far heavier than currency. Others will write letters home, describing a kingdom powerful, ordered, and proud, but always through that same veil of otherness. They wear coral as we wear crowns, one says, yet they call it sacred, not precious. Generations later, historians will read those journals and argue endlessly. Was it admiration or arrogance or just confusion? Some will say these early travelers respected Benin's splendor. Others insist they reduced it to curiosities. And even now, scholars still debate. Did the Portuguese understand that those red beads once came from their own Mediterranean waters, torn from reefs by divers who risked their lives? Or did they imagine they'd discovered something wholly African, untouched by their own hands? History, like the ocean, loves irony. The same coral the Europeans once harvested became a crown they could not wear. As night drifts closer again, you picture the ships pulling away, their sails catching the last blush of the sky, their hulls heavy with misunderstandings. The tide folds around their keels, whispering secrets they'll never hear. And behind them, Benin glows quietly, crimson and eternal, unbothered by the absence of gold. You can almost feel the warmth of the coral beads again, humming faintly against your wrist, the pulse of centuries still alive. You wonder how many times stories like this repeated, travelers arriving certain of what wealth should look like, only to find color, spirit, and meaning that defied every ledger. Somewhere in the distance, today's storyteller's voice hums low, the kind of rhythm that's half lullaby, half history. The coral glints in your mind's eye, reflecting not greed but grace. You let the sound carry you forward. The laughter of the market, the calm gaze of the oba, the puzzled sighs of the Europeans fading into memory. And as you breathe out, the night closes in like a soft red curtain. The city still shimmers, but now it belongs only to dreams, waiting patient for the next tide to bring another curious traveler to its gates. The sun has dipped low now, and you feel the warmth of the late afternoon on your skin, a soft golden heat that mingles with the faint saltiness carried by the wind from the river. You stroll through the palace grounds once more, past the polished brass gates and corridors, heavy with carved wood, but this time your gaze lingers on the small, intimate details, the glint of coral beads on the heads of young pages, the rhythmic sway of red strands on the arms of court musicians. Coral is everywhere, a language spoken not in words but in light and weight and presence, and you realize that each bead carries a story far deeper than the mere shimmer of its surface. You remember the European travelers from before, wide-eyed and confused, their journals full of shaky sketches and hesitant phrases. They came seeking gold, and they found another kind of power altogether. You wander into the hall where the Oba's most important advisors gather. The air here is thicker, scented faintly with palm oil and incense, a reminder that rituals and politics are never far apart in this kingdom. Coral beads are not just decoration. They are authority made tangible. Each necklace, each bracelet, each crown of red is a signal to everyone present that power is both visible and sacred. You notice a young courtier trying to adjust the collar of his own coral ensemble, tugging nervously, as if aware that even the slightest misalignment could be seen as disrespect. The Europeans would have called it fashion, or perhaps eccentric display, but you know better. It is a strict and eloquent code, spoken silently, yet understood by all. The Oba himself sits on a throne of carved wood and bronze, a figure both serene and commanding. His gaze sweeps over the room with the patience of centuries, and you can almost feel the weight of history pressing lightly on your shoulders as you watch. You notice the way the red beads catch the light at different angles, some pale, some nearly crimson, as if each one contains a fragment of a setting sun. The European visitors, had they remained in the room, would likely have stared in awe and puzzlement. They might have jotted notes like, "The king's jewelry is strange and unnatural," or "The people seem obsessed with red stones," unaware that these very stones are encoded with layers of meaning. Some scholars still debate whether the Oba's choice of coral over gold was purely symbolic, spiritual, or a shrewd political statement. Others insist it was all three at once. You drift closer to a council table, where advisors pore over documents and scrolls. You can hear the faint scrape of quills against parchment, the quiet murmurs of conversation in Edo, punctuated by soft laughter when a joke travels down the line. Coral adorns nearly every hand and wrist, its weight a subtle reminder that the authority of the state rests not in written laws alone, but in a living, tangible emblem. One advisor gestures toward a young scribe, tapping a finger against the beads on his own wrist. "Remember," he says gently, "these are not ornaments. Each bead carries the breath of the ancestors." The scribe nods, eyes wide, and you can almost imagine the same words slipping past the lips of a European visitor, though with a very different tone, perhaps disbelief or condescension, as they tried, and often failed, to grasp the depth of Benin's traditions. Outside, the gardens shimmer with the last traces of daylight. The coral in the palace catches and refracts the faint sun, casting little red sparks across the walls and floors, like tiny embers. You notice the rhythm of life here, a careful choreography in which every gesture, every object, every gaze reinforces order and reverence. The Europeans, who tend to measure power by the glint of metal or the weight of coin, cannot quite decipher this language. They see the coral and note its rarity, but they miss its voice. The Oba's court does not merely display wealth. It communicates lineage, legitimacy, and the delicate balance between the living and the ancestral. In one quiet corner, you spot a craftsman polishing a coral necklace. His fingers move deftly, almost in a dance as he wipes away the last traces of dust and oil. You notice that his workbench is scattered with tiny tools, some of which would look laughably simple to a European observer, yet in these hands they conjure objects of profound significance. Each bead is strung with careful precision, every knot placed just so. Some beads are smooth and warm to the touch, others rougher, as though they have absorbed the ocean's memory. The European visitors would have called it artisan work, maybe even exotic. You know that it is far more than that. These beads are carriers of meaning, vessels of power, and symbols of authority that only the Oba and his closest circle can fully command. You drift through the hallways, your feet soft against polished wood, imagining how each visitor might have reacted to the everyday rituals here. The European gaze, untrained in the subtleties of Benin's social fabric, often misread gestures that were loaded with centuries of history. A handshake, a bow, a tilt of the head, each carried unspoken information. When they saw a courtier adjusting a strand of coral, they might have laughed or thought it vain. You smile gently because you understand. The slightest misalignment could alter perceptions of loyalty, respect, or authority. Even a bead out of place could ripple through the social order, subtle yet undeniable. And yet, despite the careful rules, there is warmth here. Laughter bubbles occasionally from a hidden corridor. A child peeks through a doorway, eyes wide at the procession of red beads. You can hear the rustle of cloth and the gentle clinking of coral as people move. The European visitors would have described this as chaotic, perhaps even theatrical, but you sense the deep harmony beneath it. Every movement is measured, every glance intentional, and every bead tells a story of continuity, protection, and sacred lineage. You pause before a tall cabinet displaying rows of coral necklaces, bracelets, and crowns. The pieces catch the fading light and seem to pulse softly, almost alive. It occurs to you that the Europeans might have envied these treasures without ever understanding them. They would have catalogued them, labeled them, perhaps even taken some as curiosities to faraway lands. Some scholars argue that the fascination with these objects by outsiders reveals more about European preoccupations than about the kingdom itself. You notice a reflection of yourself in the glass, surrounded by red light. In that reflection, you are both observer and participant, caught in the delicate interplay of presence and power. The hall grows quieter as the sun dips completely below the horizon. Shadows stretch long and soft, touching the edges of every carved panel and strand of coral. You hear the whisper of a fan brushing against leaves outside, and the faint echo of drums from a distant celebration. The European gaze has faded now, carried away by the river and the tides. What remains is the memory of their astonishment, the sense of a kingdom unbothered by their misunderstanding. You feel the red glow wrapping around you, warm and reassuring, as if the beads themselves are breathing gently. Alive with the stories of ancestors and kings, before you leave, you take a final look at the Oba, calm on his throne, the coral resting in measured layers across his chest, wrists, and neck. You see the power, the sanctity, and the delicate poetry of authority made visible. The Europeans may have come with gold in mind, but it was coral that spoke. Coral that commanded respect, that codified hierarchy, that carried spiritual and political weight beyond the comprehension of those who had only ever seen metal and coin. Historians will still debate whether outsiders ever fully grasped this language, whether they understood the subtle codes or merely glimpsed the spectacle. But you, walking quietly among them, sense the deeper truth. Power is not only what glimmers, sometimes it is what glows from within. And so, as the last rays of sunlight fade and the red shimmer settles into shadow, you leave the hall feeling the pulse of Benin linger in your chest. The coral whispers softly in memory, echoing tales of obedience, reverence, and the quiet authority of a kingdom that needed no gold to shine. You take a breath, exhaling slowly, and carry with you the understanding that some of the richest treasures are those measured not by wealth, but by the depth of their meaning. The kingdom hums around you, calm, ordered, eternal, its language written in red, alive in the beads, and remembered even when the European gaze has long departed. You step into the night, letting the soft air carry away the echoes of misunderstanding, and for a moment the world feels balanced again, as if each coral bead holds the tide of history gently in its grasp. The lesson is simple and profound. Here in Benin, power spoke in coral, and it spoke clearly to all who could listen. The late afternoon light spills gently across the palace walls, and you find yourself drawn once more to the shimmering strands of coral that adorn the Oba and his court. As you walk quietly along the polished floors, the soft clink of beads punctuates each step you take, like a muted metronome keeping time with the pulse of the kingdom. You pause to watch a young page adjust the weight of a coral necklace on his shoulders. It's a small, almost imperceptible gesture, yet you sense the weight of centuries in it, not just of the beads themselves, but of the meaning woven into each crimson piece. In Benin, coral is far more than ornamentation. It is a living symbol of authority, of ancestral favor, of connection between the human and the divine. As you lean closer to observe, you almost hear the faint whispers of ancestors threading through the air, each bead a note in a complex symphony of history. You think of the Europeans who first came to this kingdom. They arrived with gold coins clinking in their purses, eyes gleaming with ambition. Yet it was not gold they would remember. Their sketches, hurried and shaky, tried to capture the Oba's image, the sprawling palace and the endless sea of red that seemed to flow from the royal family's collars and wrists. They marveled, they scribbled, they misunderstood. You smile to yourself because you know the truth. They were looking for wealth in the wrong form, trying to measure power with tools that could not quantify meaning, unable to read the language of coral. Some historians still debate whether these European visitors grasped even a fraction of the subtlety before they returned home. Their minds a jumble of fascination and confusion, their notebooks full of curious errors. As you move deeper into the palace, the air carries the faint, briny scent of the nearby river, mingling with the warmth of polished bronze and the soft aroma of incense. The interplay of coral and bronze is everywhere, in the statues that commemorate past obas, in the delicate armlets and crowns that crown the living king, in the ceremonial masks tucked into corners for special rituals. Each piece of coral seems almost alive, catching the light and bending it into warm red glimmers that dance along the walls. You imagine the European visitors, eyes wide, trying to categorize what they saw. Red beads for kings, bronze for eternity, wood for history, yet unable to understand the spiritual, political, and social interplay at work. They wrote down what they could see, but the beating heart of the kingdom remained hidden to them. An intricate language only fluently spoken within these walls. You pause near a row of seated courtiers, each wearing coral necklaces of varying lengths and thicknesses. Their postures are attentive but relaxed, a subtle tension between the comfort of home and the weight of their responsibility. The beads clink softly as they shift, each sound a gentle echo of generations past. You notice one elder, adjusting his wristlet with careful hands, eyes glinting with the reflection of red light. A bead out of place, you think, could change the way a visitor interprets loyalty. The European travelers would have laughed at this meticulousness, calling it over-care or superstition. But you know the truth. These beads speak in whispers and subtle glimmers of hierarchy, sacred authority and ancestral vigilance. They are codes, ceremonial language and protection all at once. The Oba's throne room stretches before you, a space where light and shadow play across intricate carvings and polished bronze surfaces. The coral worn by the king seems to absorb the ambient glow, radiating a soft warmth that contrasts sharply with the metallic chill of the statues surrounding him. As you step closer, you can feel a kind of rhythm in the room, almost like the ocean itself echoing through the walls. Each coral strand worn by the Oba and his attendants vibrates with symbolic resonance, legitimacy, protection, continuity. You remember a story told by a courtier about an ancestor whose presence was said to dwell in a single coral bead, and it strikes you how much belief and history are condensed into these small, delicate objects. The Europeans, with their focus on the shiny and the tangible, could only marvel at the surface, missing the layered depth of meaning beneath. Moving toward the windows, you see sunlight filtering through the red coral beads, casting a warm glow onto the polished floors. You notice the subtle differences in hue, some beads nearly scarlet, others soft rose, as if each one contains its own story, a fragment of ocean, of blood, of memory. The European visitors would likely have recorded this as curiosity, maybe even excess, noting the strange obsession with red adornments. Yet for you, standing quietly among the court, it is clear that these beads are a language. Who wears them? Where and how speaks volumes about rank, favor, and the invisible lines of power that stitch the kingdom together. Some historians still debate whether these color variations were intentional codes or simply the natural beauty of the coral. You lean toward believing that every shade, every choice, is deliberate, a dialogue between the living Oba, his ancestors, and the people he governs. In a quieter corner, a young artisan polishes a set of coral beads for a ceremonial sash. You watch as he wipes each one carefully, fingers moving with practiced precision. The Europeans, had they lingered long enough to see him at work, might have described it as exotic craft, or perhaps merely quaint. But you understand the ritual behind each movement. The coral is not just decoration. It is a conduit of power, a bearer of memory. You hear him murmur softly as he works, reciting ancestral blessings, a low chant that seems to make the beads shimmer even more vividly. You chuckle quietly to yourself because it feels almost like watching a musician tuning an invisible orchestra. The beads are the instruments, the Oba is the composer, and the kingdom is the audience. The evening deepens, and the palace corridors grow softer with fading light. You catch the glint of coral bracelets on the hands of courtiers, the long necklaces draped elegantly across shoulders, the delicate chains circling wrists like tiny rivers of red. Outside, the river murmurs against its banks. and somewhere in the distance, drums begin a slow rhythm for a festival you cannot yet see. The European gaze has long since departed, yet you feel their shadow as you notice the careful way the court moves, the subtle hierarchy enforced by posture and adornment. What they might have called a fashion statement is, in reality, a precise language of legitimacy. Even the placement of a single coral bead on a crown or necklace communicates authority, lineage, and divine favor. A small child peeks from behind a carved column, curiosity shining in her wide eyes. Her tiny wrists are already wrapped in modest strands of coral, the beginnings of a lifelong education in the language of power. You smile softly because the Europeans might have thought such details trivial, not realizing that from the smallest hand to the ober's own, coral carries the kingdom's rhythm, its sacred heartbeat. You remember the story of the young prince who learned to balance respect, duty, and play through the gentle weight of a single coral bead on his wrist. Some historians continue to debate how much of this language was universally understood and how much remained subtle, almost secret, kept safe within the palace walls. Finally, you approach the ober himself, seated serenely, coral layered in thoughtful patterns across his chest and shoulders. He glances at you with calm eyes, an almost imperceptible nod acknowledging your presence. The European visitors would have gawked, confused, overwhelmed, missing the nuance entirely. But you understand that this is the ultimate display of authority. Coral not just adorning, but defining the king. It is power in a language outsiders cannot read, a vocabulary of legitimacy, ancestral favor, and sacred responsibility. The glow of red seems to pulse slowly, like the tide of memory itself, echoing the rhythms of the river outside and the history contained in each bead. As twilight settles fully across the palace, you step back, letting the weight of what you have observed sink in. Coral is not simply decoration, not merely a luxury or curiosity. It is a statement, a code, a living emblem of power. It connects the ober to his ancestors, the court to the kingdom, and the people to a history written not in ink or metal alone, but in living, glowing beads. You take a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the kingdom settle in your chest, a quiet rhythm that echoes with centuries of life, ceremony, and authority. The European gaze has faded, their notes and sketches long since packed away, yet you carry with you the understanding they could not grasp. Coral is power, yes, but more than that. It is memory, protection, and an eloquent voice that speaks across generations, speaking clearly to all who can listen carefully, with respect and patience. You let the soft red light wash over you one last time, feeling the heartbeat of Benin echo in the silence, alive and unwavering, as the evening darkens around you, and you walk away carrying the quiet song of coral with you. The year is 1897, and the air over Benin City carries a tense, almost electric quality that you can feel in your chest as you walk the winding streets. The red glow of coral beads, once calm and ceremonial, now seems to tremble in anticipation, casting strange, fleeting reflections across the polished bronze plaques that line the palace walls. You hear distant drumbeats, uneven, uncertain, a rhythm not for celebration but for warning, for the preparation of something that feels heavier than mere history. The ober's guards move with precise tension, every step measured, every glance toward the horizon, sharp, vigilant. You think you hear the whisper of ancestors in the wind, murmuring in a language you do not fully understand, their voices threading through the branches of the palm trees and the patterns of the carved ivory doors. There's a sense of foreboding, an undercurrent of unease, and you can almost see the red beads clinging a little tighter to the necks and wrists of the court, as though they themselves know the storm that is coming. You wander closer to the palace gates, noticing the contrast between the usual splendor of Benin and the shadow that now stretches across the city. The European punitive expedition has arrived, marching with heavy boots that drum against the soft earth, carrying the weight of imperial arrogance in their polished weapons. For the first time, you feel the dissonance between what the world sees and what the kingdom holds in its heart. To the Europeans, Benin is a prize, a collection of treasures to be seized and catalogued. To the ober and his people, it is a living kingdom, vibrant with ritual, lineage, and the sacred glow of coral that binds the past to the present. You notice the courtiers exchanging hurried glances, their coral beads clinking nervously, their hands brushing over the symbolic chains that protect more than just the body. They protect memory, identity, and spiritual continuity. As the army approaches, you walk through the palace corridors, past chambers filled with intricately carved wooden doors, bronze plaques depicting centuries of obas, and delicate coral necklaces hung meticulously for ceremonial use. Each room echoes with the weight of history, the silent stories of those who have come before. Some historians still debate exactly how prepared the kingdom was for this moment, whether diplomacy or deterrence could have changed the course of events. You, however, feel the urgency in the rhythm of the red beads, the quiet warning in the subtle alignment of ceremonial arrangements. Even in this tense stillness, the air smells faintly of incense and river water, a reminder of the enduring spirit of Benin despite the looming threat. Suddenly you hear the crackle of flames in the distance. You follow the sound, heart quickening, and the view that opens before you is both mesmerizing and horrifying. The palace, the pride of centuries, is being set ablaze. Smoke twists upward in thick black spirals, and the brilliant reds of coral glint eerily in the flickering firelight. Courtiers rush to rescue sacred objects, to shield what they can, but the destruction is swift and unrelenting. You feel a shiver along your spine as you notice the European soldiers moving systematically, taking what they deem valuable, unaware, or indifferent to the deeper significance of each object. Bronze plaques, ceremonial masks, and sacred coral beads are torn from their places, destined to be viewed as trophies rather than living symbols. You can almost hear the whispers of ancestors wincing, the old voices rising in alarm as centuries of ritual and reverence are reduced to piles of loot and ash. You move closer to one of the outer chambers, where the Oba's personal collection of coral necklaces and armlets is kept. The beads shimmer faintly, almost defiantly, as though resisting the chaos around them. Some historians argue that the Oba's treasures were deliberately concentrated to protect them from destruction, while others suggest that the sheer scale of the assault made any attempt at safeguarding nearly impossible. You see a young attendant clutching a handful of coral, eyes wide, lips trembling. There is a quiet bravery in that gesture, a determination to preserve continuity even as the walls themselves burn. You think of the European records that describe these moments with a kind of detached curiosity, failing to capture the spiritual and cultural devastation unfolding in every smoldering corridor. Outside, the city is a mixture of smoke, confusion, and the unrelenting footfalls of soldiers. The market is abandoned, the riverbanks silent, except for the occasional cry of someone fleeing. You follow the trail of the firelight back to the central courtyard, where the Oba's throne once stood, now surrounded by smoke and chaos. It is almost impossible to reconcile the grandeur you saw earlier, the gleaming coral, the polished bronze, the orderly rows of courtiers, with the destruction that now dominates every corner of the palace. You notice a single strand of coral, lying in the dirt, its red hue untainted by smoke still glowing softly. You pick it up and feel a shiver run down your spine. It is as if, even in defeat, the spirit of Benin endures, captured in the quiet defiance of a single bead. The European soldiers move methodically through the palace, cataloguing objects, tearing down murals, and collecting what they can carry. You follow at a distance, trying to make sense of their priorities. To them, bronze and coral are commodities, measures of wealth, evidence of conquest. To the kingdom, each item is a repository of stories, ancestry, and sacred authority. The sea. Fire continues to consume the structures around you, flames curling into the sky, and you notice the way the light reflects on the remaining coral beads. It is almost mesmerizing, an eerie reminder that even in destruction, beauty and meaning persist. Some historians continue to debate the extent to which the destruction was intentional or a side effect of the expedition. But as you watch, the weight of loss feels both deliberate and irrevocable. You move toward the outer walls, where families huddle with what they could carry, clutching children and precious objects. The Oba himself is unseen, a figure of mystery amid the chaos, and you imagine the quiet tension as he coordinates, directs, and mourns simultaneously. Even in exile within his own palace, he must maintain the dignity and ritual responsibility that his position demands. You notice a young guard carefully adjusting the Oba's discarded coral crown, as if ensuring that even in ruins, the hierarchy and sacred order are acknowledged. There is a surreal quality to this, a sense that history is unfolding with both brutality and reverence interlaced. As night falls, the firelight dies down to a simmering glow, and the air grows heavy with smoke, ash, and the faint, lingering scent of incense. You step back and take in the devastation. The palace roof collapsed in sections, statues toppled, and the carefully arranged coral necklaces scattered like fallen stars across the dirt floors. The Oba's treasury, once a marvel of red and gold, is now a mixture of chaos and memory, each bead and plaque carrying the weight of loss. Some historians still debate how much of the palace's sacred treasures survived, and whether the spiritual essence of the Oba's authority could endure such devastation. Yet, in the quiet moments, you sense that these symbols, these beads of coral, still carry life within them, still speak to the ancestors, still pulse with the rhythm of the kingdom. You wander through the smoldering courtyards, touching the remnants of carved doors and fallen bronze. The coral beads catch what remains of the firelight, each one a testament to resilience, continuity, and the sacred life force of Benin. You imagine future generations discovering these remnants, piecing together stories from fragments of red, and feel the subtle reassurance that culture, once deeply rooted, cannot be entirely erased. You notice a single statue, half burned but standing, its coral accents flickering faintly. You imagine the European soldiers viewing it as spoil of war, never realizing it is a guardian in miniature, still watching, still protecting, still telling its story in silence. Finally, as darkness blankets the city and the fire reduces to glowing embers, you pause, feeling the weight of what has transpired. The loss is profound, yet within it, a spark of continuity remains. The red coral, the bronze plaques, the carved doors, the whispered stories, all have survived in fragments, waiting for the day they will speak again. You take a deep breath, inhaling the smoky air mixed with the river's dampness, and realize that even in devastation, the kingdom's heart continues to beat, quiet but unbroken. The flames have consumed the structures, the European soldiers have taken what they please, and the city is hushed. Yet as you stand there amidst the ruins, you sense that history has preserved more than destruction can ever erase. The coral remains, a living language of authority and memory, and you understand that the spirit of Benin, though wounded, continues its journey through time. You take one last look at the scattered red beads, the blackened bronze and the smoldering walls, letting the enormity of loss and the resilience of culture settle deep within you as the night air cools and a distant river murmurs its timeless rhythm, carrying with it the echoes of ancestors who still watch, still guide, and still whisper the enduring story of their kingdom. The Palace of Benin, once vibrant and alive with ritual, now lies in smoldering ruin, the air thick with ash and the lingering scent of incense burned too quickly in a panicked attempt to protect sacred spaces. You step cautiously through the remains, feeling the uneven ground beneath your feet, littered with shards of bronze plaques and scattered coral beads, each one glowing faintly in the shadow of destruction. The city outside is eerily quiet, as if holding its breath in mourning, while the distant river whispers a rhythm that feels both ancient and enduring. You notice that some European soldiers are already at work, cataloging and collecting what they consider treasures, unaware that they are moving through not just material wealth, but the very soul of a kingdom. The Oba's throne room, where red coral once gleamed like captured sunlight, is now a chaotic tableau of looted artifacts, burnt wood, and half-melted wax candles. You pick up a single coral bead from the dust, its smooth surface warm from the fire's residual heat, and it seems to pulse with memory, a heartbeat echoing across centuries. Some historians still debate how much of the palace's spiritual authority could survive such devastation, but standing here, you feel that it lingers stubbornly in the objects themselves, stubbornly resisting erasure. You follow a small convoy of soldiers as they begin to move the most prominent items, the bronze plaques depicting past Obas, ceremonial masks with coral inlays, and strings of red beads, out of the city toward the coast. The journey will be long, arduous, and detached from the cultural context that gives these objects life. As you walk behind them, you notice how the sun catches on the coral, refracting into brief sparks of red as if each bead is signaling a silent protest. The Oba's attendants, those few who survived the initial chaos, follow at a discreet distance, carrying what little they could save, their eyes a mix of fear and quiet determination. There is a tension between the methodical, almost bureaucratic European approach to these objects and the profound, spiritual significance they hold. These were not simply goods to be transported. They were living symbols, channels to ancestors, to the very essence of Benin's identity. Some Europeans recorded their journey in meticulous detail, yet often completely misinterpreted what they observed, focusing on aesthetic curiosity rather than the deeper, sacred connections embedded in each piece. The coral beads, once worn proudly around the necks, wrists, and crowns of the Oba and his court, now jingle softly in wooden crates, their melody almost mournful, a faint echo of the ceremonies that once defined the rhythm of palace life. You imagine the market squares, the ceremonial courts, the nights filled with song and drum beats where these beads were more than ornamentation. They were authority, continuity, and protection. Now packed for transport, they seem strangely vulnerable, stripped of their ceremonial context. Even so, as the convoy makes its way through riverside paths and dense forests, you feel the enduring spirit of Benin embedded in each item, a silent witness to the empire's former glory. Some historians argue over the choices made by the Oba and his courtiers during these moments. Should they have hidden the treasures more aggressively, or was the eventual loss inevitable given the scale of the expedition? Yet in holding a single coral necklace in your hand, you realize that the cultural and spiritual essence cannot be measured merely in terms of survival or loss. It lives in memory, in ritual continuity, and in the quiet resistance of each artifact itself. The journey toward the coast is both physically grueling and emotionally taxing. You notice the European soldiers moving with precise efficiency, carefully packing each bronze plaque and coral string, labeling crates with a cold practicality. They do not see the sacrifices, the rituals, or the human lives intertwined with these objects. They see only value measured in metal and aesthetic appeal. Yet for you, walking in the wake of this procession, every step resonates with history, and every sound of shifting cargo echoes centuries of tradition and loss. At one point, a crate containing a particularly intricate coral headdress tips slightly. You instinctively reach to steady it, feeling the delicate balance between the tangible and the sacred. Even a simple misalignment could have spiritual consequences in Benin belief, yet the soldiers remain unaware, as if the very universe of meaning contained in these items is invisible to them. You catch yourself smiling faintly at the absurdity. It's like transporting a full orchestra, in cases without ever realizing it plays music, and yet somehow you hope that the music survives the journey intact. As the convoy nears the coast, the landscape shifts. The dense forests give way to the salty air of the estuary, and the sun reflects sharply off the water, creating fleeting glimmers on the remaining coral strands peeking through the crates. Boats await to carry the treasures across the sea, and you can sense the tension between the pull of the river's current and the finality of what is about to leave Benin forever. The Oba's attendants linger, watching with expressions that mix sorrow, anxiety, and a kind of resigned dignity. Some historians still debate whether these individuals were able to preserve any of the spiritual authority embedded in the objects during transit. But you sense that the connection endures, like a whisper traveling downriver, carried in memory and ritual practices that even the soldiers cannot comprehend. You imagine future generations decades later encountering these objects in a foreign land, and wonder how much of their original meaning can ever survive such displacement. On board the ships, the treasures are stored below decks, nestled in crates, the scent of the ocean mingling with the lingering odor of smoke and ash. The coral beads and bronze artifacts now share space with salt water and humidity, an incongruity that seems almost insulting to the careful, sacred arrangements once observed in the palace. As the vessel begins to move, you feel the slow, deliberate motion of the river, the subtle rocking that mirrors the unease and uncertainty of the kingdom's current state. European officers record inventories meticulously, yet none perceive the subtle language of power and continuity embedded in each artifact. Nor do they realize that every clink of coral against bronze is a muted heartbeat of Benin itself. You imagine the ancestors observing silently from beyond, their presence unbroken by distance, their voices threading through the salt-laden air, reassuring the living that the kingdom's spirit persists even in transit. During the voyage, there are moments of surreal stillness. The sun dips low over the horizon, casting a golden-red sheen over the river, and the coral beads shimmer faintly in their wooden confines. You walk along the deck, tracing patterns in the air as though conducting an invisible orchestra of history. Each crate, each artifact, carries weight far beyond its physical mass, a weight of stories, rituals, lineage, and sacred authority. Some historians still debate whether the very act of moving these objects removed their spiritual potency, but you sense that their essence, their memory, and their symbolic language of power remain intact, patiently waiting for the day they will be understood and restored. You lean against the railing, the river's current tugging at the vessel, and for a moment, you almost hear the whispers of the oba, the soft chant of court rituals, the gentle clinking of coral beads guiding the kingdom through displacement. As the ship sails into wider waters, leaving the familiar coast of Benin behind, you reflect on the sheer resilience embedded in these treasures. Bronze plaques, coral beads, and ceremonial artifacts may have been uprooted from their context, but they carry forward a narrative of cultural endurance. You imagine the halls of museums across the sea, where future generations will encounter these items, initially as curiosities, then gradually as storytellers bridging centuries and continents. You feel a quiet satisfaction knowing that even through forced displacement, the spirit of Benin is not extinguished. It is merely traveling, carrying its stories across oceans, awaiting recognition and respect. The coral in particular seems to glow with quiet defiance, a reminder that true power and cultural authority are never fully owned by those who seize them, but by those who understand and honor their meaning. Night falls over the open water, and the artifacts rest below deck, the gentle rocking of the vessel mimicking the pulse of history itself. You feel the weight of what has been lost, yet also a subtle hope that these objects, sacred and redolent of power, will eventually reclaim their voice. Some historians argue endlessly about the ethics, the decisions, and the inevitability of the voyage, but standing there, observing the play of moonlight on the crates, you sense a deeper truth. Cultural memory and spiritual essence are not bound by geography, and the heartbeat of Benin continues steady and persistent, beneath the waves, and within each carefully preserved bead and plaque. The journey to London is long, uncertain, and surreal. Each movement of the ship feels both oppressive and oddly serene, a contradiction that mirrors the tension between loss and resilience. You wander the deck one last time, feeling the wind carry faint scents of the riverbanks left behind, imagining the ghosts of ancestors mingling with the salt and spray, whispering reassurance. You touch one of the crates containing coral necklaces and feel a warmth radiate from it, as though the bead remembers the ceremonies, the dances, and the rituals it once graced. Even in transit, it maintains a quiet dignity, a silent declaration that the kingdom's soul travels with it, unbroken and enduring. By the time the vessel approaches European shores, the artifacts have become witnesses, carriers of a story far greater than any ledger or inventory. The red glow of coral, the weight of bronze, and the echoes of sacred rituals persist through oceans and centuries, resilient against misinterpretation and displacement. You watch as the ship enters the harbor, carrying both tangible treasures and intangible memory, and feel the profound significance of this moment. The journey itself becomes part of the story, a bridge across space and time that will eventually, perhaps, allow the artifacts to reclaim their voice and their place within the living memory of Benin. Each bead, each plaque, each mask carries forward a narrative of continuity, survival, and the enduring heartbeat of a kingdom that refuses to be silenced. In the quiet that follows, as the harbor lights glint off the water and the wind carries salt and faint smoke into the night, you step back and take in the journey from palace to sea, from sacred site to foreign port. There is loss, certainly, but also an undeniable thread of persistence woven into every artifact, every coral bead, every carefully cast bronze figure. And in that persistence, you feel the true power of Benin, a kingdom whose essence transcends destruction, whose memory rides oceans, and whose sacred symbols remain alive, whispering to those who will listen and remember. The ship docks, and the treasures are unloaded, still vibrating with the sacred resonance of their origin. You pause, letting the enormity of what has transpired sink in. The tension between theft and survival, despair and hope, fading into a quiet hum of awareness. The coral, the bronze, and the rituals embedded in them will endure, speaking in subtle rhythms across time, asserting that the kingdom's heartbeat, though displaced, is never truly silenced. The museum is quiet tonight, but it is not lifeless. You walk slowly past the tall glass cases, your footsteps muffled by the thick carpet, and immediately notice the way the light dances across the surface of the bronze plaques and strings of coral beads. The red gleam of the coral catches your eye first, reminding you of the palace halls you've wandered in memory, the Ober's court alive with ceremonial rhythms. You pause in front of a display, the plaques etched with depictions of past Obars frozen mid-gesture, and for a moment it is as though the room breathes along with you. The artifacts do not lie dormant. They whisper stories of dances, processions, and rituals, subtle vibrations in the air that almost tickle the skin if you lean in close. You feel your hair stir slightly in the museum's controlled climate, the faint hum of air conditioning mixing with the imagined rhythm of distant drums. A quiet smile tugs at your lips, imagining a modern security guard unknowingly passing through a space charged with centuries of spiritual authority, oblivious to the invisible orchestra playing just for you. Some historians still debate how much the presence of these artifacts in a foreign land changes their significance. And you find yourself wondering too. Does the coral still pulse with the same energy it held when it was draped around the Ober's neck or woven into ceremonial crowns? Or is it now merely decorative, a relic stripped of its context? You watch a string of beads refract the gallery light, tiny flashes of red like droplets of sun captured in glass. It feels alive. There's an odd sensation, almost as if the beads are breathing along with you, exhaling memories of past ceremonies, of chants raised in unison, of hands reverently threading them around wrists and necks. You can imagine a child in the distant past trying to sneak a glance at the Ober's red adornments, eyes wide with wonder, unaware of the centuries of lineage and divine connection held within each bead. You chuckle softly at the thought. It's like trying to peek behind the curtain of history and accidentally seeing the ghostly script of a kingdom's secret language. The bronze plaques command your attention next. Each figure, carved in intricate relief, seems to turn its gaze toward you as you move, a silent interaction across time. The figures are stiff yet alive, as if frozen mid-movement, gestures frozen but intent unbroken. You note the fine detail of ceremonial attire, the careful placement of coral, the emphasis on the Ober's posture, and realize that the plaques do not merely record history, they assert it, as though the past continues to govern the present through these forms. A few scholars have argued that without the palace's rituals, the plaques lose their authority. Yet standing here, you feel the opposite, that their authority persists, subtle but undeniable, in the careful attention they demand and the stories they compel you to imagine. You lean closer, almost whispering a greeting, and in the quiet hum of the museum, it feels as though the plaques respond with the faintest echo of a rustling garment or the shimmer of coral beads. As you move along the row of cases, your eyes catch the gentle curve of coral necklaces, each bead threaded with painstaking care. The red seems almost alive against the stark white of the display background, and you imagine the ocean from which they were harvested, the journeys they endured, and the hands that once fastened them to the Ober. The thought is both sobering and comforting. Some of the beads, you remember, were said to contain the spirits of fishermen lost at sea, and you feel their quiet presence now, a subtle heartbeat in the cool museum air. The history of Benin is not confined to maps or dates. It exists here in physical form, in the tactile, luminous, sacred remnants of a culture that refused to be erased. You trace the edge of a coral bead with a gloved finger, careful not to touch, and yet the connection feels immediate, intimate, almost conspiratorial. You feel as though you are being allowed a glimpse behind a curtain that few ever lift. You find yourself wandering from case to case, noticing the small details that might otherwise escape notice. A tiny chip in a plaque that hints at a hand too hurried or too firm, a strand of coral that is darker at its center, telling of age and endurance, a faint line on a ceremonial mask where the artist's fingers pressed with precise intent. Each imperfection, each subtle mark, is a whisper of authenticity, a signal that these objects lived, breathed, and witnessed. Some historians still debate how the displacement of these artifacts affects their authenticity, but you feel no doubt. They are not diminished. They are transformed, becoming messengers, bridges between worlds and centuries waiting patiently for recognition and understanding. You step back and observe them from afar, and the whole gallery seems to pulse softly, like a heartbeat echoing under glass, a rhythm carried from the palace to the museum floor. There is an odd intimacy in this space, a sense that the artifacts themselves are aware of your presence, that they have stories to tell if only you are willing to listen. You crouch slightly to examine a bronze head, the coral in its crown faintly shimmering under the gallery lights, and you imagine the ceremonies it witnessed, the obeisances of courtiers, the distant sound of drums vibrating through palace floors, and even the subtle sense of incense lingering in memory. The European soldiers who took these treasures centuries ago may have thought they were conquering objects. In truth, the objects themselves carry the memory and the authority, and you feel it radiating toward you. A plaque depicting a past oba seems almost to nod in recognition as you move past, and you can't help a small laugh at the absurdity of imagining history, acknowledging your quiet footsteps. In the quieter corners of the museum, the ambient lighting turns red hues into soft glows, almost reminiscent of the fading sunlight in the oba's ceremonial halls. The coral beads catch this light in a way that makes them look as if they are breathing gently, pulsing with slow, deliberate life. You imagine the artisans who threaded each bead, hands steady despite the heat of the sun and the weight of tradition pressing upon them. Some of the beads carry stories of bloodlines and sacrifice, others whispers of ocean waves and distant lands. You feel a subtle connection to them, a thread linking your present moment to centuries of ritual, art, and devotion. Occasionally, a museum visitor passes, oblivious to the subtleties, photographing the objects with a flash that momentarily disrupts the soft intimacy. And you smile, thinking of it as a modern equivalent of a curious child sneaking a glance centuries ago. The coral continues to hum softly, unbothered. Moving on, you pause before a display of ceremonial masks and headdresses. The coral inlays shimmer in subdued brilliance, and you think about the ceremonies they graced. Coronations, blessings, ancestral homage, and the delicate choreography of power and respect. These objects, now encased in glass, are still potent with memory. You can almost hear the faint echoes of chanting, the rhythm of drums, the shuffling of attendants' feet, all compressed into the silent form of the artifacts. Some scholars debate whether the absence of ritual diminishes the spiritual potency, yet standing here, you sense that the objects retain an inner life. The red of the coral seems to glow with a subtle insistence, a heartbeat of cultural memory that refuses to be silenced or ignored. You move slowly toward a larger display case, filled with bronze plaques that once adorned the walls of the palace, the images of past obas frozen mid-gesture. The meticulous craftsmanship is staggering. The way each figure holds authority, the deliberate positioning of coral, the intricate layering of symbolic imagery. It strikes you how these objects were simultaneously art and governance, spiritual channel and historical record. Even now, in the quiet hum of the museum, you sense the oba's presence, a subtle command over attention and respect conveyed without words. Occasionally, your eyes catch a glint of red coral in the muted light, and it feels as though the kingdom itself is winking, acknowledging that though the objects have been removed, their essence endures, quietly demanding recognition. Finally, you pause at a row of small coral beads, each carefully threaded into necklaces and bracelets. Their glow is understated, but it is persistent, like a memory refusing to fade. You can almost hear the distant hum of the river, the whispers of ancestors, the faint echo of court rituals. Some historians still debate how much of Benin's spiritual authority remains contained in these artifacts, but you feel certain that it is alive, quietly teaching those who listen how to remember, honor, and respect. You stand still for a moment, taking it all in. The bronze, the coral, the stories woven through them. They whisper softly, patiently, enduringly, inviting you to lean closer and remember alongside them. And as you finally step back, letting your eyes sweep the room, the museum seems to exhale a slow, deliberate sigh carrying the weight of centuries, of loss and survival, of displacement and enduring memory. You feel a gentle tug, a connection between the past and present, Between the kingdom that burned and the stories that survive, the whispers are subtle now, a soft, persistent murmur. The coral and bronze reminding you that history is alive in the quiet spaces, waiting for those who will notice, who will listen, who will carry the memory forward with reverence and care. The 21st century hums with a quiet, persistent hope, and you walk along the streets of Lagos, feeling the subtle buzz of a city alive with both memory and creation. The air smells faintly of salt from the nearby lagoon, mingled with the aroma of roasting plantains and the distant hum of traffic, a modern orchestra that somehow harmonizes with the centuries-old rhythms you've been tracing. Artists, scholars, and community leaders gather in small studios and workshops, their hands moving deftly over coral beads, bronze plaques, and sketches of Obas, reviving a legacy that history tried to scatter across oceans and continents. You follow along as they examine fragments of what once adorned the Obas court. Listening closely to whispered instructions, notice how the curve of this bead mirrors the hand that threaded it centuries ago, one artist murmurs. You lean in, almost as though you could feel the energy of those past hands threading the coral, each one carrying intention, devotion, and subtle authority. A soft chuckle escapes you at the thought. It's like modern artisans are time travelers, stitching together centuries with strands of red beads, all while the city hums in the background like an oversized metronome. The effort to resurrect these traditions is meticulous. Coral necklaces are restrung, carefully inspected for authenticity, with each bead compared to the glimmering fragments in museum collections, sometimes across continents. You watch as a young apprentice lifts a particularly lustrous bead, holding it to the light, and you can see her mind tracing the ocean currents from which it was harvested. There's a kind of magic in that moment, the intersection of labor, reverence, and imagination. Some historians debate whether contemporary recreations can fully capture the spiritual weight of the originals, but standing here among the vibrant energy, you can almost hear the past approving quietly. The Obas may no longer rule from gilded palaces, yet their presence is palpable, threaded through these red strands and etched into bronze surfaces reborn in workshops, alive in ways that a museum display cannot fully contain. You feel the connection as a low hum in your chest, subtle but insistent, like a distant drum from a long-forgotten procession calling you forward. Across town, the same dedication manifests in collaborative exhibitions and cultural programs. Curators from Benin and Nigeria work alongside international scholars to restore not only physical artifacts, but the knowledge embedded in them. You imagine a classroom filled with students, tracing the designs of plaques and masks, fingers hovering over intricate reliefs projected onto large screens. An instructor explains how coral beads were more than adornment. They were the language of power, diplomacy, and spiritual protection. A student leans back and quips, "So basically it's like wearing a CEO badge with extra cosmic insurance," and you can't help laughing softly at the analogy. The humor is gentle, respectful even, a modern echo of the playful curiosity that might have filled the palace corridors centuries ago. And as the lesson continues, the coral seems to glow in your imagination, the red tide rising again in vivid detail, a reminder that cultural memory is as much about perception and attention as it is about material objects. In smaller studios, you watch artists sketch and carve new bronze heads of Obas, imagining the interplay between light and shadow, the rhythm of ceremony and the weight of history. Coral beads are woven into intricate patterns, looping around the necks and wrists of models or mannequins, meant to embody the Oba's spirit. You note the subtle variations in color, from deep crimson to a softer coral pink, each shade chosen to reflect specific ritual significance or to honor a particular lineage. There's a precision here, a reverence that mirrors the meticulous work of the old palace artisans. Some of the artists speak quietly of feeling the presence of those who came before, hands guiding theirs, whispers of processions and blessings threading through their focus. You smile at the thought. Time itself seems elastic in these spaces, compressing centuries into the careful threading of coral, the slow burn of a bronze casting, the deliberate carving of a face, meant to convey authority and protection. It's almost like history itself has taken a deep breath, leaning forward to watch, approving or correcting in ways imperceptible, but deeply felt. The city itself becomes a canvas for these cultural resurrections. Public art installations feature large bronze sculptures, with strings of coral looping through and around them, catching the sunlight in flashes of red brilliance. You walk past one such installation and feel a tug in your chest, a subtle vibration as if the coral is communicating a memory to the present moment. Children play nearby, their laughter threading through the air, and you notice one pausing to examine the beads on a sculpture, eyes wide, curiosity lighting her face. She reaches out with a tentative finger, almost daring to touch, and you imagine centuries ago a young boy doing much the same, sneaking a glance at an ober's regalia in the palace, heart racing with awe. There's humor in the continuity, a playful reminder that wonder transcends time. You laugh softly, leaning down to whisper to the child as though she might hear you. Be gentle. These beads have stories older than the tallest building in your city. Artisanal workshops are not the only spaces of revival. Festivals and public ceremonies echo with red tides of coral, celebrating not just aesthetic beauty but the cultural authority it represents. You find yourself standing in a crowd as dancers move rhythmically, their headdresses adorned with coral beads, reflecting sunlight and city lights alike. The drums vibrate through your feet, a grounding pulse linking your body to the history around you. Some scholars debate whether these contemporary performances can capture the sacred weight of past rituals, yet the energy is undeniable. Coral beads swing and shimmer with every step, every gesture charged with centuries of meaning, and you feel the thrill of recognition. Here is a kingdom returning to life, not confined to textbooks or museum cases, but breathing in the streets, in the hands and voices of people dedicated to remembering. You grin at the thought, this is a parade, a lesson and a celebration rolled into one, a gentle rebellion against the passage of time that tried to obscure the ober's authority. You wander into a quieter alley where an older artist sits threading coral beads onto a new necklace. His hands are steady, though the skin bears the weight of decades, and you notice how carefully he inspects each bead, turning it in the light to capture the depth of color and history within. You kneel beside him, trying to see the pattern of memory embedded in his motions. Each bead carries a song, he murmurs, voice almost drowned by the distant city hum. A song of rivers, of ancestors, of kings. You feel a shiver of awe. There's an intimacy here, a secret transmission of knowledge that bridges centuries, a gentle insistence that what was almost lost is being remembered, honored, and renewed. A smile flickers across your lips. You think of it as a time-traveling wink from history, acknowledging that yes, the kingdom persists, resilient and vivid, in ways that no fire or exile could erase. At night, these efforts take on an almost mystical quality. Studio lights illuminate coral and bronze in warm glows, and you imagine the ober's presence hovering quietly, approving of the care, precision, and reverence. The rhythmic sounds of stringing beads, polishing bronze, and sketching reliefs form a soft nocturnal symphony, a counterpoint to the muted city hum outside. You walk slowly through this space, senses alert to every subtle sound and shimmer of light, feeling connected not just to the artists, but to the lineage and memory they sustain. The past and present seem to merge, coral and bronze threads weaving a tapestry that extends through time, asserting that history is alive not only in museums, but in dedicated hands, in streets, in classrooms, and in the quiet breaths of those who care enough to remember. You whisper softly to yourself, half in awe, half in amusement. Bet the ober would be pleased and slightly amused by our modern cityscape workshops. In the quiet aftermath of these creative efforts, you reflect on the journey of Benin's treasures, from sacred halls to foreign museums, and back into the heart of the culture. Coral, once a marker of exclusive authority, now threads together communities, artists, and students in a living dialogue with history. Bronze plaques, newly cast or carefully replicated, breathe life into stories that might otherwise have remained silent. You feel the pulse of a culture resilient, dynamic, and patient, teaching, reminding, and celebrating even across centuries. There's humor in the continuity, a sense of mischief perhaps in imagining the ober chuckling at how far his kingdom has traveled, and yet how close it feels tonight. And you can't help but lean into that thought, letting the pulse of coral, bronze, and memory wash over you gently, a warm current of reassurance and wonder. You leave the workshop district, the streets quieter now, and notice how the red of the coral seems to glow softly in your mind's eye, a tide of remembrance rising and receding, powerful yet gentle. There's an odd serenity in knowing that the kingdom, though once battered and dispersed, continues to assert itself through the artistry, devotion, and memory of a people determined not to forget. The coral flows like a river of light in your imagination, echoing the rivers that first brought merchants and treasures centuries ago. You smile softly, heart full of the quiet joy of witnessing continuity, resilience and revival, a wave of red tide that lifts and carries you through the night, gentle yet persistent, tender yet insistent, the kingdom breathing quietly into the present. The night wraps itself gently around you, soft as the whisper of silk sliding over bare skin, and you take a slow breath, feeling the lingering warmth of the day fade into a tender, cool quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a faint wind stirs through the branches, brushing against rooftops and rustling leaves, a subtle percussion accompanying the gentle murmur in your chest. You imagine yourself standing on the edge of memory, peering into the depths of a kingdom that seems both distant and immediately present, its red glow like an ember beneath layers of time. The kingdom of Benin, once towering and vibrant, sleeps now not in death but in slumber, dreaming quietly beneath the weight of centuries, yet alive in fragments of coral bronze and stories whispered from hand to hand. You can almost feel the pulse of that sleeping city beneath your feet, like the slow rhythm of a heartbeat, steady and patient, awaiting the moment when it rises again, resilient and unbroken. You take a step forward in this dreamscape, your footfalls soft on the imagined earth, and you see the flickering reflection of coral beads across a calm river, stretching like molten rubies beneath the moonlight. It's mesmerizing, hypnotic even, the way the red seems to flow and swell as if alive, a tide carrying both memory and promise. You remember threads from the previous stories, the merchants who brought treasures from distant lands, the artisans threading beads with reverent precision, the obas whose presence lingered long after the palace halls went silent. And here, in this quiet space of imagination, all those threads intertwine, weaving a tapestry of continuity that defies the years, the wars, and the long dispersal of treasures across oceans. You chuckle softly, thinking, who knew that following a trail of red beads would lead me to the kingdom's heartbeat? It's a playful, almost irreverent thought, yet comforting in its absurdity, a reminder that history, even in its most solemn moments, can smile with you if you let it. The red tide flows further, now spilling across the streets of your mind, reaching the markets, the workshops, the quiet corners where children once played and artisans once labored. You see them again threading coral beads, polishing bronze plaques, carving tiny, intricate reliefs, hands moving with knowledge carried through generations. There's a soft humor in imagining a modern-day artisan thinking aloud, if only the Oba could see me now, he'd probably ask for a coffee first, and you can't help but smile at the image. The living continuity of culture manifests in the tiniest details. The subtle flicker of light across a bead, the shadow of a relief catching just so, the rhythmic thrum of distant drums echoing the heartbeat of memory itself. It's a soft music that seems almost woven into the night air, coaxing your attention to linger, to notice, to feel. You let yourself sink into it, walking slowly, as if each step is a stitch in the vast quilt of history unfolding around you. Even in the quiet of your imagination, you notice the Oba's presence, subtle yet unmistakable, not as a ruler demanding obeisance, but as a guardian of memory, a silent observer of what has endured and what has returned. You lean closer to a coral necklace lying across a velvet cushion in the dream, and it feels warm, as if infused with the essence of those who threaded it long ago. The beads glint in the dim moonlight, and you almost hear them humming softly, each a note in a melody composed of centuries of devotion, ceremony, and artistry. Some scholars debate whether modern recreations can truly capture the spiritual authority of the originals. Yet standing here, you feel the weight and care embedded in each bead, a tangible echo of sacred intent. You grin softly, thinking how delightfully complicated it is, a kingdom sleeping and awake at the same time, found in museum glass cases, and yet alive in hands that remember and honor its past. You wander further into this dream, and the landscape shifts gently, becoming a quiet palace courtyard. Bronze plaques, now free from the confines of glass, catch the soft moonlight, their reliefs casting elongated shadows like the stretching of memory itself. Coral beads are draped over low walls and benches, looping like slow, liquid ribbons across carved surfaces. You pause, inhaling the imagined scent of aged wood, warm bronze, and a faint brine of the ocean. an olfactory echo of centuries gone by. It is intimate here, as though the kingdom itself leans in to speak to you, whispering its stories in subtle gestures, the tilt of a plaque, the shimmer of a bead, the pattern in the carving. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze surface and smile at the thought, here you are, part of the kingdom's dreamscape, a silent companion to its memories, a witness to its quiet endurance. Time seems to stretch and fold in this space. You notice the soft interplay of coral and bronze, how they catch and reflect one another, a dance of light and memory. A faint echo of drums ripples through the courtyard, slow and deliberate, a heartbeat threading through your consciousness. You think of the centuries of rituals, processions and ceremonies, the obas adorned in coral, bronze plaques documenting the kingdom's history, and artisans working under flickering lamps and midday sun alike. A quiet awe settles over you, tempered by a gentle humor, imagining a modern tourist peering at these artifacts and whispering, "So these are the VIP necklaces of ancient CEOs." The thought makes you chuckle softly, and you feel the soft warmth of human connection across time, an acknowledgement that reverence can coexist with a smile. The red glow seems to expand, no longer confined to beads or bronze spilling into the air, brushing the edges of rooftops and treetops, filling alleys and courtyards, rivers and streets. You notice it in the smallest details. The glint of a child's toy in a dream marketplace, the reflection of moonlight on water, the faint outline of a mural recalling the oba's visage. Each thread of red carries with it memory, authority, and continuity, and you feel it pulsing gently, a tide beneath your feet and in your chest. It's a reminder that the kingdom, though scattered, still exists in these layers of consciousness, restored through hands that remember and hearts that honor. You breathe slowly, letting the tide rise and fall within your mind, acknowledging the weight of centuries without letting it overwhelm the gentle comfort of the night. As the dreamscape softens, you see the kingdom in its entirety, not as a collection of artifacts, but as a living pulse beneath time's layers. Streets, palaces, and workshops blur into a quiet glow, the red tide of coral threading seamlessly across memory and imagination. You walk slowly, each step measured, feeling the lull of the kingdom's breath, and you smile at its persistence. There's serenity here, a sense of belonging to a history both ancient and immediate, one that doesn't demand completion but offers quiet presence. You whisper softly, almost to yourself, "You are here, I see you, and you are remembered." And the kingdom seems to reply with the faint rustle of leaves, the shimmer of bronze, and the gentle glint of coral beads. Your attention drifts to the smallest details as the night deepens, the gentle flicker of light across a bronze relief, the delicate curve of a bead, the imagined rustle of ceremonial garments long gone. These details hold the kingdom in suspension, fragile yet persistent, and you let your senses follow them, tracing their paths in gentle, deliberate motion. You feel the rhythm of centuries in your chest, the soft vibration of rituals remembered and recreated, the heartbeat of a culture that refuses to be lost. You think of the artisans, scholars, and dreamers who keep this memory alive, and you feel a quiet gratitude, a recognition that the kingdom thrives not only in grand palaces, but in the hands, hearts, and imaginations of those who care enough to remember. Finally, the glow softens, fading into a gentle emberscape that stretches into the infinite night. You feel the red tide recede, a lullaby of memory and continuity, carrying you toward a sense of peace. The kingdom rests, its pulse slow and steady beneath the waves of time, beneath the layers of sky and stars, beneath your own quiet breath. You feel cradled in its vast, gentle presence, the soft heat of coral and bronze wrapping around your consciousness like a protective blanket. It whispers in a voice only your heart can hear. The obas, the artisans, the river, the ocean, the city, all of it lives, breathing softly beneath your awareness. Now, dim the lights fully. Let the hum of the night seep in. Maybe wrap yourself in something warm and familiar, and surrender to the soft, undulating rhythm of a kingdom that sleeps beneath the surface, quiet but never gone. The red tide pulses gently, a lullaby that stretches across centuries, brushing softly against the edges of consciousness until all thoughts drift into slumber. Carried on waves of coral and bronze, memory and imagination, past and present entwined, end of script. Sweet dreams.